Hello and welcome to our Success Ceiling Breakthrough Training, the next in our 10x Growth Accelerators. And if you've not done so already, go watch Making Your Quantum Leap. Watch that training and today's session in combination. Get those two things working together. Lots of great complements between both, lots of great crossovers, and you can really get these ideas working in harmony to compound the results that you get. So welcome to today's training. I'm delighted that you're joining me. Thank you so much for your time, your attention. I really appreciate it. And you know what? It tells me that you're ready to do this work and smash your ceilings. Now, we all know about externally imposed ceilings, particularly in the workplace. But today we're talking about those internally set ceilings. And I'm really excited to deliver this training because you're here inside the academy to take things to the next level. You're looking for stratospheric change, and that means necessarily going beyond previously set limits. And that kind of change requires an acclimatization. You're now operating in the rarefied air up and above your limits, and we need to adjust and adapt because we all set for ourselves a level of success at which we're comfortable. I mean, just take a moment to notice that right now. We've set for ourselves limits on the amount of money we think we deserve or want to earn, the position and status that we're happy to take, the level of visibility that we're happy to put ourselves through. We set limits on our happiness. We set limits on our success, and anything beyond that becomes incredibly uncomfortable. I'll just share with you for a moment that one of my sessions with one of my coaches just a few months ago, and she managed to tease out of me that I'd sort of set a limit on the amount of happiness that I was willing to accept. And I think it was like 2 days a week. That was the kind of level of happiness I was comfortable at. Anything beyond that, not that comfortable. I want to just pull myself back into a bit of misery. Isn't it curious that we set for ourselves these limits of success at which we're comfortable? And this is important because when we nudge those limits, as we start to move through a journey of success and we start to hit against those upper limits, uncertainty comes in and a little bit of discomfort. And the change that's upon us, that's the first indication to the human brain that there's a little bit of threat coming. And uncertainty, discomfort, threat, these don't work well for the brain. And all of this creates resistance in us. And so our motivation becomes to really just stay safe, to keep us in our comfort zone. And we do that through limiting behaviours and self-sabotaging our results. Now, all of this is great if we want to stay in the comfort zone, if we want to keep ourselves in that place of no resistance, but it comes at a cost. We plateau, we regress, it halts our progress, we limit our results, and we stunt our achievement. Now, the reason that everybody falls into this trap is they just don't know about their internal ceiling. We put it down to outside issues, challenges, a lack of knowledge or experience or talent. And it's easily explained with those kinds of very commonplace challenges that we all have. And let's face it, those are far more ego-friendly. To say it's something outside of myself, it's some issue or some challenge, rather than something I've kind of done to myself. But here's the problem. When we see things that way, when we don't have an appreciation for these internal ceilings that we set, we end up trying to fix the symptoms and not the cause. Our ceilings therefore remain and the limits persist. So in today's training, we're going to deepen your appreciation for your upper limits. We're going to increase awareness for when they're in play and how you're doing it. We're going to develop some self-coaching tools to unpack your upper limit. And then we're going to reset our definitions of the upper limit and absolutely build some strategies and tactics to help you to really smash through your ceilings, both right now and for every project you take on from here on. So grab the workbook, it's attached to this post, and follow along. Let's get to work. So let's start by unpacking our upper limits and really understanding what's going on here. And you'll find everything from here on in today's session will be in the accompanying workbook. So make sure you grab that. You might like to reference it as we step through. It'll make the process super easy to step through and to complete. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to identify some of the levels that you've maybe set for yourself. Think about things like the level of money or position and status or visibility that you're happy to take on. Think about the limits that you set around the levels of responsibility that you want for yourself, for your team, for the projects that you're working on. Think about the limits you might have set around the level of authority or control that you want, or the level of opinion that you're happy to put out there, or the level of thought leadership that you're willing to step into. So let's just start by identifying some of the levels that you've set for yourself. And I want you just to bring those into awareness. Just notice what those are. No emotional charge and certainly no berating yourself. It can be very easy to just get very frustrated about the limits that we put on ourselves. But for now, let's just notice what those levels are. Second step here is to think a little bit about when those limits come into play and how we're doing it. We have strategies for everything, including our dysfunction. So how are you doing these upper limits? So the first thing we're going to do is think about the triggers, the moments these things happen, just like a habit. Then we're going to look at the behavior, again, like a habit. In the habit loop, we have the triggers that lead to the behaviors that give us a reward. So it's very similar with our upper limits. There's a trigger, we step into some behavior, and the reward that we get from that is we can come back from our upper limits and get back into the comfort zone. So we've talked about that comes with a real cost. So we want to notice what these triggers and behaviors are so that we can really do something about it. So when and how do you limit yourself? And you'll find 4 options in your workbook that will start to give you a little bit of a steer about where to look. And the first area is when we're nearing failure. I'm about to finish on something, I'm thinking I'm going to fail on this, so I kind of maybe drop out. And the key theme here is avoidance. I want to just avoid the failure before it becomes something, so I don't have to face up to it. Second area where this might be a challenge for us, where our limits might kick in, is immediately following a failure. We start lining up the excuses. That's the key theme there. Another key area is when we're nearing success. We're just about to really finish on our big project. We're about to put the thing live. Everything's going to come to fruition. And I kind of stop trying, for example, or maybe some other limiting behaviors that just give me a little bit of insurance so that if this were to be successful, or if it weren't to be successful, then I would have these excuses, these insurance policies to say, here's why that didn't work. And the fourth key area is following success. We step into self-sabotaging behaviours, limiting behaviours that undo our good work. And here it's all about regression. We've been successful, we've stepped up to the next level, we're in this rarefied air, but we've not acclimatized, we're not ready for it. And so we want to get back, and so we regress. And that's where our limiting behaviors kick in. So let's think a little bit about the trigger for those limiting behaviors, those ways that we limit ourselves. Is it for you when you're nearing failure? Is it when you've just followed a failure? Is it when you're nearing success? Is it when you've actually achieved the success? Take some time now to notice when and how you limit yourself. In those moments that are your key kryptonite, maybe it's nearing failure, or maybe it's following success. Notice how you limit yourself in those moments. What are your strategies so that you better know your triggers and the motivations behind the ensuing behaviors. That way you're going to bring these into awareness and you can start to do something about them. Now, the third step in our process is to understand some of the internal reasons that you might want to self-sabotage. And you've probably been waiting for this bit because maybe you've been asking yourself all through this training, why would I ever self-sabotage? Why would I undo my efforts? Why would I not want success? Well, here are some possibilities. Maybe I'm worried that I would outshine others if I was successful. Maybe my success means that I'm disrespecting my roots because nobody else in my family or my immediate circle has ever done this before. Maybe I think that my success would make other people feel bad, and that makes me feel bad, so I don't want that. Perhaps I feel that my next level of success will invite a certain level of spotlight or attention or criticism or even attack that I just feel like I wouldn't be able to handle. Maybe I feel like my next level of success, I'd be very undeserving of that, and that would give me some really difficult and uncomfortable feelings that I want to avoid. And maybe my fear is that things will be taken away. If I'm successful, I'll somehow lose it. So I'd just like you to take a little moment to think, what are some of the internal reasons that might be going on for you that lead to those self-limiting behaviors? And here's the self-coaching prompt to pose for yourself. I must not elevate beyond my upper limit or excel to my full potential and success because, and I'd love you just to finish that sentence. What are the reasons? Why must you not allow yourself to elevate beyond your upper limits or to excel to your full potential or to completely realize your success? What are the reasons behind that? Okay, so we've identified some of the levels that you've set for yourself, the trigger moments at which you limit yourself, and started to pinpoint some of the internal reasons why you might not want to surpass your internally set upper limit. Now, let's turn our attentions to what needs to shift here if you are going to break through that ceiling. And before we get into this, I just want you to make a decision right now. Are you willing to step through this ceiling? Do you want that? Are you willing to do the work and make this happen? If it's a hell yeah, let's get into this. Now here, what I want you to start with is reflecting on what you need to be willing to allow. Because as much as we are the source of our limits, we are also the source of resetting that limit. And that's a question of allowance. So here's your self-coaching prompt for this element. To break through my ceiling, the successes I must be willing to allow are, and I'd love you to finish that sentence. Maybe the successes I must be willing to allow myself are around making a certain amount of money, or holding a certain position or level of status or responsibility, taking a certain level of ownership. So what are the levels that you need to allow, the successes that you need to allow if you're going to break through this ceiling? And let's couple that sense of allowing success with some real world action. You know, the most successful people I ever work with, they always have this habit of pairing their deepest insights and inspirations with an action. And they set an action at the scene of that insight, at the scene of that insight. So here's your self-coaching prompt to get into some immediate action. If I were allowing of those successes, I would ... And what I'd love you to do is create a list, let's say a dozen actions that you would take if you would but allow yourself the new levels of success you just defined. And that's your immediate action plan. Okay, so you're going to acknowledge the successes that you must now be willing to allow if you're going to break through this ceiling. And then you're going to set for yourself the action plan that you would execute on, that if and when you did that, would allow those successes, would be representation of you allowing those successes. So let me ask you, how's that feeling so far? Perhaps it's a little frustrating to realize these limits that we impose on ourselves. Maybe there's a little bit of discomfort about getting into action. But I also hope that there's lots of excitement there about how possible it is to reset these limits and some motivation for the actions that you can now get into. So that was part one of our success ceiling breakthrough process to really help us unpack some of the upper limits that we set for ourselves. In this second part, we're going to define a few more real-world strategies and tactics that you can use to start comfortably playing in the rarefied air of your next level. And to really prime this section, I'd like you first of all just to rethink of all the things that are now normal for you that once upon a time were way above your limits. And just take a moment to really acknowledge your capacity and capability for growth. There are things that for you are just normal, average, everyday things now that once upon a time were something difficult, something that you thought you maybe could never do, something way beyond your upper limit. So let's just notice our absolute capacity for growth. And with that in mind, let's build some strategies. And here I'd love you to remind yourself of the last two prompts in the previous section. So to break through my ceiling, the successes I must be willing to allow are, and just bring to mind some of those successes that you need to allow for yourself. And the second prompt, if I were allowing of those successes, I would, and just bring to mind some of the actions that you would get into. And with those ideas in mind, I invite you to redefine your upper limit and to do that now. So redefine your upper limit with the coaching prompt, at my newly defined upper limit, I will easily and joyously, and now I want you to finish that. I will easily and joyously make a certain level of money, hold a certain position, hold and enjoy a certain level of visibility, and or whatever constitutes you at your new and next level. So let's redefine those upper limits. There's the coaching prompt for you. At my newly defined upper limit, I will easily and joyously, and I just want you to finish that sentence. And please be sure to include all the things that we've already talked about, but also the actions, the behaviors, the habits and the decisions that characterize you at this new level. Okay, final piece of the puzzle is to build some actionable tactics into your days and your weeks. So I'm going to step through 5, 6, 7 ideas, and you can take some notes. You'll find them in the workbook too. But what I'd love you to do is think about weaving this in to your daily routines and your performance rituals. So it's just part of your DNA. It's part of what you do week in, week out. And the first idea is to come up with some near-term incremental wins that you can focus on that really push and move you beyond your upper limit. So what would be some incremental wins? If this were a process, what would that process look like? What would the progression of those actions and what would some of the small wins look like if you were to move through that? So just make a few notes on some near-term incremental wins that you could focus on. Do that in your journaling session. Do that with the workbooks that we've got to help you. Brainstorm a few ideas, just incremental step change wins that get you closer and closer beyond your upper limit. Second thing I'd love you to do is to track and acknowledge progress. So important that when we're going through this incremental increase of our upper limits, to track and acknowledge the progress. Give us that internal feedback loop. Remind yourself what you've done well, what's working, what you're achieving. So you've got that sense of progress and momentum. Third idea I want to give you is all around new problems. When you step up to a new level, there's going to be a new set of problems. We can all be guilty of thinking, well, I want to move up to this next level so I'll have no problems at all. Of course we're going to have problems. They're just going to be different problems at a new level. And you'll have them and you want them because it's a signal that you're now up at this new level. So I want you to brainstorm some of the new problems that not only you'll have, but you're going to welcome. Think a little bit about how you're going to play with those, how you're going to work with those, the kind of standards that you're going to need to elevate to really work through these new problems. Next key idea, major moves. And if you've watched our previous 10x Growth Accelerator, Making Your Quantum Leap, you'll know all about your major moves. What are the key moves that will signal that you've moved beyond your previously imposed limits? There will be some major moves, some key ideas, some mini projects inside that are going to signal that you are way beyond your previously set upper limits. So what are those major moves? Brainstorm those, chart those out, and make sure you've got a plan for execution. Next key idea, remove contradictions. And like I said, if you've watched Making Your Quantum Leap, you'll know all about contradictions. There will be some contradictions in your life, in your setup, in where you spend your time, in your environment. And we want to identify those and we want to eradicate them. You're stepping up to a new limit. There are contradictions in your life that are constantly signaling that you're not there yet. We want to eradicate those. Next key idea, action. In response to the new problems that we've thought about, in terms of the major moves that you're going to execute, in terms of the contradictions that you want to remove, what are the actions that you now need to take that's going to propel you to this and beyond this new limit? And finally, the forcing functions that you're going to use to support you. Who can you publicize these new ideas to? Who can hold you to account? What kind of public declarations can you make? What can you do to make sure that this really happens? So a few key tactics there: incremental wins, tracking and acknowledging progress, living into and welcoming new problems, making some major moves, removing the contradictions, getting into action, and using forcing functions to support you. Let's use all of these actionable tactics, really build these into your days and your weeks so you can smash your upper limits and your internally set ceilings. Okay, so there we have an end-to-end process to unpack your self-imposed upper limits and internal ceilings, to reset those limits, and to take action to smash through them. And to help you embed the learning, I invite you to start observing not just your own limits, but the limits of the people around you, the limits you suspect others might be imposing on themselves. And you don't need to mention this to anyone else, but just build the habit of seeing beyond the presenting behavior and reframing those actions in the context of self-imposed limitations. Before you go, just take a moment, as always, to consider what's your key insight from today's session. What's been the most important piece of learning that will change up how you do things from here? Which of your self-imposed limits and ceilings are you most excited to go smash straight after this training? And what's the commitment that you're making to yourself from here on and forevermore? I hope you've enjoyed today's session as much as I've enjoyed delivering it, and I hope the principles and practices that we've shared will serve you well career long. Don't forget to put your questions and comments in the chat roll below, and I look forward to seeing you in our next session.